So you've got yourself a piece of steel. This is 1080, which is its designation, and it comes from ground flat stock. It's 3.2mm by 40mm, so 3.2mm thick by 40mm deep, and I've got 500mm here, so half a metre. And the price of this is probably about 14 or 15 pounds, and that's you know, delivered to the door. And you can get 3 knives out of this, so it's quite easy to, you know, make the best of the steel. So once you've got your steel, you then need to make a design. It doesn't really matter what the knife looks like as long as it's functional, and don't get too bogged down with, you know, all of the detail at this point, because it really is just a rough sketch. What you do need to understand or have is enough room for your hand on the handle area, along the spine and in the grip there, okay? And then the blade usually proportionally is about the same length, if not a little tiny bit longer than the handle area. But this is something that I found very difficult at the beginning. I'd always design a knife, and once I'd made it or cut it out of cardboard, it would never fit quite right. So better to have too much here, and then you can take a little bit of material off in the later processes, and don't get too bogged down with all the details at the moment. It really is just its roughest form. And then we need to transfer that shape onto the steel. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. I often use a cereal box, so this is just a slightly more refined shape. I'll cut that out, put it onto the steel either with a Pritt stick or some spray adhesive, and then I'll go around it with a Sharpie or another permanent pen of some description, or even spray it and then remove the template, and you're left with a negative. It's just so that you've got a line to saw or use the angle grinder against. So once you've got your template cut, you can just apply it to the steel. Make sure that you've got it within the area of the actual steel itself. Make sure you've got no overhang. There you go, and then just go around it with a Sharpie. And it's as easy as that, really. It's not rocket science. There we go, and that's more than sufficient to cut around with a saw or an angle grinder. And again, I'll just reiterate, don't need to be too concerned at this point. As long as you're cutting on the outside of that line you've done, we can still remove that amount of material to tidy things up afterwards. So don't be too concerned about getting it absolutely perfect. That's more than good enough for what we need. Another method you could use is going around your template with a piece of paper. Again, just making sure that it fits within the confines of the steel that you're going to use, and then just use Pritt stick or some form of spray adhesive to stick that paper to the metal, and you don't even actually have to draw around that. Then you can cut to the line. What I have found with this method though sometimes is, if you build up a lot of heat in the steel whilst you're working it, which you can do when you're sawing and using an angle grinder, then the adhesive tends to fail and the template starts to peel up. And I think if you were starting out and your template started to peel up and you hadn't marked it, it could be quite unnerving because you don't really know the shape of your knife then. So a simple way to negate that is just to go around this template with a Sharpie as well, as a precaution should it come off. Some people like this physical sort of template on the steel. It just gives them confidence, which is, you know, absolutely fine. So that's just another method. So this is Dychem, which is a professional machinist's layout fluid, and once it's dried, it just allows you to scrape off and leave the bare metal underneath. I use this for a lot of applications just because it's very persistent and it's accurate, and it gives you a nice neat line to work off. And all I'm using here is a scribe. You could use a nail or a screw, anything that will just take the surface off of that Dychem, just to give you a line to follow with the saw or your angle grinder, like so. So this is my portable bandsaw. It's a specifically for metal cutting, bi-metal metal cutting blade. I made a little table for it and just a little stand. Again, it's nothing fantastic, but it does the job perfectly. And this is all I use really for cutting out my blades, swords, and everything. The throat, which is the area that you can work, is a little bit restrictive, but I've never not found a way around it. There's always a way to sort of get around it. So I'll show you how that works now. I've just got my PPE on, so I'm just going to put my glasses on. I've got my gloves on. I've got my ear defenders on. And we're just going to cut out this one here. Remember, it's 3.2 millimeters, 1080 steel. It will take a few minutes, so I'll put it onto time lapse. As you can see, I don't want to force the blade around these contours because these radiuses are a little bit too much with a 1/2 inch blade. So all I've done is just section this off, and you do exactly the same with an angle grinder, and then I'll just pick these off one at a time. As I come towards the end of the cut, I just release the pressure slightly so that the blade doesn't jar and jump into the next piece, taking the teeth off the blade. And again, this is something I've learned through trial and error. So we'll crack on. So as I said, I've nipped in a little bit, and I've left a little bit of material on there as well. And remember, the scribe line is the outside edge of our piece of steel that we want to actually turn into our knife. So I've got plenty of room left on there. It's only about 1/2 mil and sometimes even 1/4 mil in places, but there's enough meat on there for me to work with and to shape the knife correctly afterwards. And you can already start to sort of see that, you know, it's coming together now. We've got something tangible. So we'll crack on with the next step now. Just a word on angle grinders and discs. Angle grinders are dangerous. It's as simple as that. Even the most practiced hands, if you get complacent, you will get bitten. The discs themselves are designated for one job and one job alone, and they come in different thicknesses and different sizes, so make sure that you get the correct disc for your grinder. Metal cutting, that is all it's used for. This is a slightly thicker one, it's probably about 2 mil. Okay, so you will lose that amount of material in the cut. Metal grinding, exactly what it says on the tin. Don't use it for cutting or you'll chip the edge of the blades, things will start to fly off. It is meant for grinding in a parallel motion, and it will remove material quickly. And this is a cut off disc, okay, very, very thin. I think it's 1.2 millimeters. So this is what I prefer to use for cutting steel. You get a very fine cut, and obviously it keeps the metal cooler as well. The key thing with these discs is, against these ones, is the metal cut-off disc, which is this one, is absolutely flat, and the other discs have got a small recess here. And on your angle grinder you have a capping screw, and it's two double-sided, so you know you've got a recess this side for this sort of disc, so when you put the disc onto the grinder, that recess keeps the disc in place. And when you're using a cut-off disc and the disc is flat, you use the flat surface, so you get maximum area of contact on the locking wheel itself. If you're in doubt, have a look at the manufacturer's recommendations with regards to what to use and how, but do not take any chances with an angle grinder because it will end badly. I cannot emphasise that enough. This is my disclaimer. I use my angle grinder as safely as I possibly can. I wear full PPE, glasses, gloves and a respirator, and I always use the recommended disc for the recommended job. What you do is your choice. So just to show another method, we're going to cut the other knife that we've templated with an angle grinder, and I'm going to use a cut-off disc for this. I've secured it to the bench with a G-clamp. This is just a cheap one from eBay. It's nothing, again, nothing special, but it does the job. Nice and secure, and it will just allow me to work safely, and that's the most important thing. If it's loose and wobbly, you're thinking about that as well as other things. It's very dangerous, especially with an angle grinder. So we've got our blade roughed out now, and what we need to do is just refine the profile. Number of ways you can do this. You can use files, you can use a knife grinder, you could use a belt sander, you could use a number of different things. I think the easiest thing for access for most people to get to is an angle grinder, be that electric or battery, and a grinding disc, not a cutting disc. Okay, it's the thicker of the two, and it clearly states on the blade metal grinding, and this will remove material as we go along. What we need to do is just get the basic shape found, and then we can refine it with files and abrasives a bit further on. Just a careful, steady hand and a good eye, and you'll achieve this very quickly. Just be mindful of where your sparks are going, and try not to build up too much heat in the piece as well if you can help it, and that's just basically not pressing too hard, letting the abrasives do the work, and we'll see how we go. So full PPE again, mask, glasses and gloves. And you can see there, in just 30 seconds, we've got a reasonable shape to it. Don't go too far, because what we can do is refine this with files now. This is the part where you've got to take your time and do it right. And be mindful, obviously, it's easy to take material off, but you can't put it back on. So just go steady, and if you're in any doubt whatsoever, just stop and have another look at what's going on. So what I've done now is just gone around with the angle grinder and roughed in the profile. Again, nothing too daft. I've just taken a little bit of material off to give it a basic shape, and what I'll do now is I'll take my time with the files and I'll refine that all the way around. It does take time and it does take patience, but it's worth doing to get it right at this stage, because it'll just cause more work further on. You can see there's lots of refinement needed. You can do this with the angle grinder, but I wanted to demonstrate just how good the files are at removing material. So you can start wherever you like. I'll just pop the knife into the vise and start work on the spine here. Files wise, I've got a half round. These are bastard cuts, so they're first cut files, and you can pick these up from boot fairs. I've got a large rasp, which again is a bastard cut, first cut, and then a slightly smoother second cut file. And again, boot fair handles, again, they're just a couple of quid and nothing daft. So I've got a mask on because they're small fibres of metal, and obviously some gloves as well, and my safety glasses as always. And just get to work. Oh. Also, remember with a file, I'm not teaching people to suck eggs, but the file only cuts on the forward stroke. It doesn't cut on the back stroke, so don't work yourself into a bit of a froth. Just push, and you'll feel the file biting and remove the material. So as you can see, filing does take time, and it's a lot of work, but if you want the good results, you've got to do it. And there are a number of other ways you can do this as well. You could use a Dremel tool, with a burr, a carbide burr or a stone on there, and because this is 1080 steel, it's quite easy to work with, and that will remove material a little bit more quickly. Again, it's just time saving, but you've got to be accurate and you've got to have a good hand, good eye and a steady hand. But we'll just keep working away at this now with a few other different methods just to sort of show you how it can be done. Just going to the next step now. This is what I use to profile my knives. This is my Bailey grinder. I'm not sure what horsepower or speed it is, but it removes material really quickly and very accurately. There are a number of contact wheels and a flat platen as well. So I'll just demonstrate how that works, just for, you know, just so you know. This is my workhorse, this is my main grinder. It's a variable speed 2x72 inch belt, obviously different grits, and I can adjust the frequency or the speed of the belt from just a crawl to, you know, a ridiculous rate of knots. But it just gives me the accuracy, or I measure all the tables and make sure that they're at the correct angle using a digital level monitor, so I know this is a perfect 90-degree angle for getting the surfaces absolutely correct. But again, it's just to demonstrate in another method of doing it. We'll have a quick look now. So we're all profiled up now, and as it turns out, it seems that we're making two knives, but that's fine because there's a bit of redundancy there and a bit of margin for error. And obviously we just crack on. So this will be one, this will be two. What we're going to do now is we're going to identify where our handle material is going to come to and where we're going to locate our pins. Now, the number of pins and where they go is entirely up to you. I just follow a pretty straightforward sort of equal distance method, and I put the lanyard hole in one of two places. The first thing I like to do then, I'll just take number one out of the way for this, is just to work out where my handle material is going to come to. And I usually have this in between the ricasso and the choil, which are these two areas here. This is the ricasso and this is the choil. So a line just straight through there will give me a very rough idea of where my handle material will come to. Now what I want to do is leave a little bit of distance for the bevel of the front of the handle material. If you imagine on the knife, when you're looking down onto the top of the knife, your handle material will look like that at the front, or like that if you're looking at it from where your perspective is. So we need to leave a little bit of room for that, and I would say that is probably about a centimetre and a half. So between that mark and the tail, we need to work out where our two holes are going to go. So I work in metric, which is millimeters, so we've got 11 millimeters. So if I go 5.5, that gives me my 11, so from the top to top, and then halfway between these two, or a quarter depending on how far you want to go. So I'm going to say that's 5.5. I'm going to go back probably to 5. No, that's wrong. I'm going to go 4.5, and I'm going to go 4.5 from the tail as well for my rear pin. And then my lanyard tube I'll probably put down here. Obviously, what I can do now is just to put these into the middle, is measure across the waist or the width of that distance. So that is 27, and that is 32, so 16 for that one. That's about right. And this one needs to come back a tiny bit. Actually no, that's fine as well. 27, that's fine. And then we just mark those with a centre punch now, to ensure that the drill has got something to bite into. So you can have them wherever you like, and to be honest with you, looking at that, I'm not really pleased with that goes either, so I'm going to probably move that to there, so it's in between those two. Alright, so nothing's fixed. That looks good for me. I'm very much an eye person, to be honest with you. I've never been fantastic at maths either, so that works for me. And if when I drill this hole that one looks a little bit too far forward, I'm looking at that already and I'm thinking it is, just move it about halfway. There we go. That's good, I'm happy with that. So there's a slight drop off there in the coming into the pommel, and that'll be number 1, that'll be number 2, and then a lanyard hole. I may even move that to there, I don't know yet, we'll see how we go. So we're just going to centre punch those now. So using a centre punch and a hammer, and the centre punch is harder than the steel that we're working with, and it just puts a spot which is permanent and allows us to then, when we push the drill bit onto the steel, something for it to bite into rather than it skating across the surface and making a pig's ear of it. So that's number 1 done. We'll do number 2 now. So same sketch, but this time I'm going to use vernier. So we've got 28 there, so we'll go 14. Lock that off. And then scribe a mark, both sides. And then in between those two is where our pin goes. Same at this point here. So we've got 30, so I'll go 15. Scribe a mark, top and bottom. And in between the two, and with the lanyard hole on this one, we'll have it in the middle, just there. And again with the centre punch, missed that. And we've got 2 marks to go. So that's 1 and 2 punched up for holes. So let's go to the drill now and pop those holes in. So I'm going to drill a 6mm hole here and a 6mm hole at the back, and then an 8mm hole for my lanyard tube, and that measurement corresponds with the material that I'm going to use to secure the handles to the tang of the knife. So 6mm pin there, 6mm pin there, and a 6mm lanyard tube with a 1mm wall. So I use these DeWalt high-speed steel extreme bits. They've got a really clever little tip on the top of the drill, right on the point, and it's a silly little thing, but it just allows the drill bit to bite into the steel a little bit more easily once you're starting to get going. I'm using a hand drill for this, obviously, because this is what you all have at home. Normally I would probably use a pillar drill, but just get the drill started, okay, and put it into the rest it into the centre punch hole and just get the drill started. Don't go too fast, and make sure you've got your safety glasses on. You can see the drill bits cut in there. Keep it nice and level. There we go, and that's 1 done. So we do the next one now. So same again. And we do the same again with an 8mm. So just rethought that slightly and move that hole up a little bit, and I've already centre punched it ready. There's a bit of argument for and against piloting the hole with a 6 and then going to an 8. I'll do that anyway, but with these DeWalt drill bits there really is no need, but this is probably the safest way to do it. So drill a 6mm hole and then follow it up with an 8mm bit afterwards. And there we go. 2 6mm and 1 8mm hole. Nice and tidy, nice and straight. And what I'll do now is just countersink these now. What you've got here is an actual countersink bit. You can get these from Screwfix, Argos, all that sort of stuff, and off eBay. You don't have to use this. If you are stuck and you haven't got a countersink bit, all this is for really is just to deburr the edge where we've drilled. Just use a file, okay, to flatten off that area there, because the last thing you want is a burr catching your finger, a nasty business. But this is the best way to do it. And it just gives you a nice recess. And we'll flip it over and do exactly the same on the other side. Done. And that's our pinholes drilled. Super simple. So just come over to the mill to work on knife number 1. Just kind of showing you the best case scenario, I suppose, really. So a mill is just a very accurate drill, if you like, but as well as drilling holes, you can actually move and cut material with it because it's quite sturdy. This is only a mini mill, it's nothing fantastic, but it's perfect for what I need. So it's got variable speed again, very accurate, and you'll see just how accurate it is now. So again, it's been centre punched, and we'll just go for it. There's no messing around with this one, it's very accurate and lets the drill bit do its work. A few seconds. So this is an old Progress drill from the 1940s, and I have my countersink bit permanently fitted on here. It's a right noisy old thing, but I love it. There we go, all countersunk. So there we are now, off camera. All I've done is just added some weight saving holes in both knives. Now there's a difference, obviously these are 8mm, these are 6mm, and the reason I do that is if I was going to use a synthetic material for the handle, which I probably will on this knife, then the synthetic is always heavier than a hardwood, so I'd use slightly larger holes to save a bit more weight, and then obviously 6mm for the one with a wood on it. These aren't necessary, but it just adds to that little bit of finesse, and if you're using the knife for a long time, if it's heavy, it is going to fatigue your hand. It's as simple as that. These also make nice glue pegs as well. When we put and sandwich the two scales or handles onto the sides of the knives, then the epoxy will form a peg between the two pieces of material through these holes, and it's just reassuring to know that as well. But that's as far as we're going to go for today, I think. And the next thing we'll be looking at is putting the bevels on these edges here, which is the dark art. But we'll dispel all of that as we crack on. So yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers.